Welcome to Life Expansion After 50. Today, I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm doing a couple of footwork drills where I actually time myself so that I can have a reference, but also anybody watching who's interested in trying some of these things out for themselves, you have a reference as well. I'm using a basketball court. You can't see it now. It's blown out because of the exposure. I'm in the shade because the cameras get hot and stop working. But I'll change the exposure. You'll be able to see it. Now, the reason I'm doing this is because our biological age, typically after 40, starts to decline and continues declining down to 75. The life expectancy, which could be 75, 80, depending on what table you're looking at, is actually not accurate for somebody who's over 50 because it includes all of the births and deaths from 0 on. And it doesn't adjust the math as we get older. So if you look at a reset table for 50 years old, you'll see that the life expectancy is more like early 90s, and by the time you get there, it's probably going to be more like 100, 104. So this is important because we can either live our lives just waiting and slowing down, continuing to decline, or we could turn things around and turn it into something and make our second half of our lives the best half, and that's the objective of this. So the reason for the physical part, this work is not all physical. I have 7 fitness areas: mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, relationship, professional, and financial. But the physiological is a big part of it, which you'll get to understand more and more and more through my lens. I'll actually be doing an overview of the 7 fitness areas after the initial footwork setup. And what I'll do is I'll be doing the time drills, and then I have to take some recovery time. And while I'm doing the recovery is when I'll talk about the 7 fitness areas. I've used this format over the last 6 weeks. I did mental area twice, then I did the physical area, and then spiritual area, and then emotional area. So this is actually the 6th one that I'm doing now, and today I'll do the overview because I don't spend a lot of time on relationship, professional, and financial in these kind of formats because it's more personal. Whatever that person's quest is what parts of the relationship, professional, financial. The big thing is having agency and personal leadership in the beginning part, the part that we control, the agency and personal leadership. The connection to footwork drills and the anti-aging is that the same benefits that we get from sprinting, and you can look that up, health benefits of sprinting, anti-aging benefits of sprinting, but you'll see things like human growth hormone, testosterone, estrogen for women after menopause, AMPK, which has to do, it's like an energy modulator, has to do with metabolism. It can improve potentially, I'm not making claims out here, but potentially insulin resistance. We have BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is the health and building of the neurons, which is important. We have 100 billion of them, so anything that's good for the neurons is good for us. And then we also have mitochondria, which is huge. So mitochondria are like mini organs inside the cells. Life is kind of fractal. You may have heard the thing, if you want to understand the macro, study the micro. And it's because things are so fractal. And so the way our bodies have organs inside to make them work, the cells have mitochondria, which are like organs. There's almost 100 different ones. And so those improve. Now, what happens is, starting around age 40, and then before, but we start noticing around age 40 with the need for more recovery, we'll start to see a decline in our biological age, if you will. Now that decline starts in the 40s, and it can taper on down to the 70s, 75, and as I mentioned, the life expectancy is actually misstated if you're 50 or over. The connection is that by engaging in activities that improve those things, as I said, mitochondria, testosterone, human growth hormone, serotonin, dopamine, glutamate, acetylcholine, the neurotransmitters. By improving that, we extend this biological aging, this line out, and there's enough research out there that says we can make this line not quite horizontal, but close to horizontal, out past age 70 and easily into 75. The research is already there saying that. What I'm doing is running an experiment over the next 20 years to see how that plays out, and can we extend that line out past 90, at least for me. I have an objective that in my 90s, I'm living those 90s in a healthy, fulfilling way, and I'm not frail in any way, I'm not limited by my mobility, and that I can still move around and still do the things that I love to do. I love to ski, I love to ride motorcycles, snowboard, exercise, whatever comes up. and riding bicycles. And I know many people in their 70s and 80s who do that and do it very well, which tells me it's very possible. But what I'm doing is pulling it all together to explain why. So it starts out with the footwork drills. Now I've got the cones set up already. What makes this work is using a specific protocol, we are telling the central nervous system that this is important. And by telling it that this is important, it's what drives the neurotransmitter. And I use the neurotransmitter as a catch-all term for all those other things that benefit, because they're not directly connected to neurotransmitter, but as I said, we have 100 billion neurons. So anything that's good for the neurons is good for us. And you'll see me start picking up the pace. The 7 factors are novelty, intention, precision, balance, progression, explosiveness, and struggle at the edge of ability. Now, struggle at the edge of ability, if you look up deep practice, you'll see that talked about quite a bit. Struggle at the edge of ability and deep practice create myelin wrapping on the neurons. And that myelin wrapping makes the neurons fire faster and with more precision. For example, if you're over 60, it's probably happened to you where you've stumbled, and in stumbling, it seems like you could be falling or recovering for multiple seconds. That would be an example, in my opinion, of the neurons not firing accurately. Remember, there's 100 billion neurons. So taking one step could easily be multiple neural pathways involved just to take one step. As the neurons get wrapped with myelin, and they fire faster and with more precision, that leads directly to skill. So deep practice is a way to drive skill. Now, the myelin does not degrade on the neurons with lack of use. The myelin on the neurons continues, but it does degrade with age. So at 50, like for example, martial arts in my teens and 20s, I probably have moves that are related, neural pathways related to martial arts moves that are wrapped with myelin, the neurons are. But there's no more synapse there. The neural pathways are inactive, and by them being inactive, they're not functioning. And what I'm doing here with these footwork drills is I'm reactivating old neural pathways, the assumption being that the myelin is still there, but the synapse is gone. So the brain does not make excess neurotransmitter. It makes as much as it needs. And there's 2 things that come into play. One is homeostasis. So the body's always working on stabilizing. It wants to be at a steady state. To get to the homeostasis, it looks ahead to see or to assess how much demand is coming. And since it's looking at the past, the present, just to kind of gauge how much neurotransmitter is being used. If you think about a hunter-gatherer standpoint, we would have had to conserve our energy at that time. So the neurotransmitter is balanced based on the demand. But there's something else. So the same kind of reasoning, there's allostasis. And allostasis is looking at if there's more demand coming, instead of trying to stabilize, what it's doing is it increases the neurotransmitter. So what I've been doing here, you can see some of this is just self-explanatory, but most of these drills include some of the novelty. These aren't really new. Doing it on concrete is new. I usually do it in the grass. But I do change things up a little bit. I'll change the spacing. So we have the novelty, we have intention. So in this one, my intention is I'm trying to put my feet in the middle between the two cones. And the overall intention is preparing myself for the speed runs later on. Now, the second thing the third one is the precision. So again, this is requiring precision because I have to get in between the cones without kicking them. So there's some precision there. Balance may not come into play, but I can certainly add balance by doing a 1 foot. And I'm also adding some explosiveness, which is the 6th one. So the 5th one is progression. Now the progression, an example would be going from here, instead of just stepping into this space, I'm stepping into the 2nd space, or the 3rd. I started this 5-6 weeks ago. I couldn't make it to the 2nd space. And now I can sometimes make it to the 3rd space. Example of progression and an example of explosiveness, because I'm having to explode off that outside leg. So just in 6 weeks, I've been able to do this. My argument is that, and based on the research, is that it didn't improve because of muscle. It improved because I strengthened my neurotransmitter signal, and strengthening the neurotransmitter signal gives me the ability to push the muscles harder. Now, all that you know about working out may include things like you got to go to failure, tear down the muscle to build it back up. Well, by the time you hit 50 and 60, and especially 70, oftentimes the neural pathway signal is not strong enough to create enough power to make the muscles tear down. So this drill here is one I normally do for my warm-ups. It gets me going forward and backwards. It's not timed or anything, but it gets me changing direction, gets the blood moving, helps me feel what needs to happen. That's just a 4-cone drill. The basic 4-cone drill would be something like this. Forward, side shuffle, back. By the way, I'm 70. About 15 years ago, I started sprinting to improve my speed on the marathon. And then I found out that there's all these benefits of sprinting. So I would sprint on and off for a couple of months at a time through the years. And one of my objectives is to, this summer, get to my sprint time from 5 years ago, using the same distance. And it was just through a process of more and more research that I discovered that the same benefits that are attributable to sprinting, you can get them from 7 factors: novelty, intention, precision, balance, progression, explosiveness, and struggle at the edge of ability. And I think struggle at the edge of ability, if you don't remember any of them, that's the one to take away. So here's the first drill. It's basically going to be, I run out here, pick up a cone, and return it to here. And then I do the next one and the next one. And this cone, 1, 2, 3, 4, is halfway distance between here and the 3-point line. And then I put the 4th cone out on the mid-court line. So this way, if you are at home and you want to try some of these same setups, you can. And this cone is only here because this is where I have to put the other cones. I'm going to add precision in there by placing the cones exactly next to the other one. That was 18.8. The 7 fitness areas. I originally created this because I had actually experienced losing everything. I had a motorcycle rental business. I took my entire life savings, used it as an investment, turned it all into a 401k, and then the 401k invested in my motorcycle business. And I thought, you know, I was on top of the world. It was going to be my forever business. I was just going to ride it out into the sunset. But, you know, a series of things happened, and one being COVID. It was an international business. People used to fly from around the world to rent my motorcycles and take them across the country. The people in Australia and Europe and South America as well. But they liked coming to the US because of the long open roads. I did sport touring, so I lived in the mountainous areas. San Francisco is where I was out of. And you had twisty roads all over the place. So everything seemed perfect. San Francisco was one of the top tourist destinations in the world. And everything was working fine until the pandemic. It was a travel business, so there was no traveling. 2 years, it was done. And I had to come back from that. I lost everything, literally everything, because you couldn't sell a tourism business when tourism was going down. The margins were so thin, which was another factor. The short version is that I had to come back from that. I had to figure out what to do. And so I sort of documented my process as I was going through it. And I had often looked at, I mean, I've been around long enough, I've seen companies get bought and then they go bankrupt, and in the process they've wiped out the pension of all the people who retired. So they work 30 years and then they retire and the pension gets wiped out. I'm sure that's going to happen now. We're seeing a lot of these private equity companies buying up great profitable businesses. Regardless, there's different ways that people are losing everything. We see some of the scams have wiped out older people. And so I thought that, well, I'm not the only one who's lost everything. I'm living it. I was still young enough. I was healthy. I was in my 60s. I said, you know, so what does it look like to come from that into back on your feet, etc. And I came up with the 7 fitness areas framework. That framework is the roadmap to get back to like that homeostasis, back to stabilization and improve. And it turned out that it wasn't just about getting back, because getting back is coming from below the line up. What I started leaning into and noticing was the similarities but also differences between coming from below the line back into the zone, but more importantly, going from the zone to get through that upper line, because we didn't come this far just to come this far, right? So, you know, it's like I didn't go through losing everything just to get back to where I was. How do we get through that line? And that's the 7 fitness areas roadmap does the 2 of those. I'll start with doing this drill one more time, but I'll do it in reverse just to save time. I'll pick up a cone and place it and then finish. I don't know if you saw me almost stumble there. I have to say sprinting is a violent activity. It's so easy to get hurt. It requires balance, precision, all of it. You can see it's all of them. That's a little bit long. That extra run takes a lot out of me. The time was 17.27. It's only a second faster. The other was 18.8. It's only a second faster compared to taking it easy, which is often the case. And it's the technique that will improve. I looked at different things. I looked at the 6 series of life. I looked at 7s. I looked at the 12 parts. There's so many of these out there. I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but I knew there was something there because I used to sell success programs that were based on this setting goals in the 6 major areas of your life. And I always felt like there was a 7th one that was missing. And so I started playing with that. I went through the 12, which was actually very good, but it's a lot. And I wanted something that was accessible, something that made sense for people who are in business, people who've been successful, and a lot of them don't have an appetite to go through a lot of extra work, or certainly nothing that sounds like mystical mumbo jumbo. And none of this is. Everything I have is grounded in science and aligned with neuroscience. And you can look it up and see it for yourself and make your own, come up with your own conclusions. The 7 fitness areas are mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and then relationship, professional, and financial. The first 4, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, are within our control. This is where our agency and personal leadership is. This is where we have access to that powerful present moment, and it's where we need to spend our time. When I say running laps around these first four, the idea of the running laps is to get better and better, to move from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence to conscious competence, and then to unconscious competence. That's the idea of doing the laps. But we can start making progress right off the bat. When I start working with somebody, it depends on what they're going through, but I can start right off the bat and make progress in the mental, physical, and spiritual area. And within one session, we can start making improvements. So I do this thing, short-term fix. We have a short-term fix that allows us to start making progress. And if there's a quest, we can even do a short-term fix for the relationship or the professional or the financial, depending on what their quest actually is. I'll go through each of those 7 areas on the next round. Right now I'm going to do another drill. This one takes actually longer than the other one. This one's probably going to take me in the mid-30s, so that's about twice as long. We start off behind this line or this cone, and we pick up a cone, put it next to that one. And there's 5 cones. You see the precision, a little bit of balance to stop and pick it up, a little bit of bounding, stopping, and starting. And I'm gonna stop it there. That was 25 seconds. I did 4 cones in 25 seconds. I stopped it because I want to keep this accessible. 5 cones is a lot. So the 7 areas, mental. Here's what we have to do when I talk about doing the laps, and I go from unconscious incompetence, and then we have to get the conscious incompetence, and then conscious competence, and then making it automatic unconscious competence. And that's why we do the laps, because there's always another way. And this is as you get from below the line into the zone, and then above the line, and then continue. See, above the line is unfamiliar, so it's scary for people. A lot of people get freaked out because they get above the line. They get the cognitive dissonance because they're doing things they never thought they could do, etc. And now they're always looking for the other shoe to drop, and there's a lot of learning that happened in that above the line zone. And that's kind of I experienced that, because I was above the line. I was making more money than I had expected. I was growing. I was the rookie of the year. I was the top franchisee for all franchises worldwide, and that was in my 3rd year. So I was making it happen. And then, like I said, things changed. And also starting to believe your own press clippings, right? That's the part of the challenge. So we'll talk about that in the above the line. But here's the basics. The mental area. The first thing we have to do is help people discern the difference between the communication from real thinking, conscious thinking, versus associations, which are the habits, the neural pathways, the associations of the network of neurons. That's energy that flows through there, but thought also is energy, and it's easy to confuse the associations with thought, which is not the same. Thinking is thinking, and associations are from the past, and often mostly created from age 0 to 7. So we have this situation where we're living out a map from 0 to 7, and here we are in our 50s or 60s wanting to do something different. That's nothing like what the world we lived in from 0 to 7. Then the next one is the physical, and this is not physical fitness, although it looks like I'm doing a lot. It's no surprise that martial arts, Rangers, Navy SEALs, a lot of your special forces, special ops, they combine the physical part with the transformation, and it makes sense now that I understand all the neurotransmitter. It's funny that these processes evolved to be 100% aligned with what I'm talking about. They did it without the benefit of the brain scanning tools. It was basically trial and error. What worked. And that's why the Army Ranger training today doesn't look that much different than it did 30 or 40 years ago. Same with the Navy SEALs, because it works. They'll tweak it. But the bigger part in the physical area, how do you access epigenetics? My quest was that if I could get the placebo effect to happen on demand, then I knew I was onto something. And that was sort of my litmus test. Can I get the placebo effect to work on demand? And what I discovered was something much better than the placebo effect. It's the overall tonic, the overall elixir, the anti-aging process, because we're making the cells stronger, and by making the cells stronger, we're becoming stronger. And I'm not going to say I could reverse aging, but certainly if a person is really in bad shape in 40s or 50s and you start doing this, you will see improvement. That's epigenetics, right? There's healing that happens from epigenetics. You've heard of spontaneous remission. A lot of people spin that into the woo-woo and they talk about vibration and energy and parallel universes and all that stuff. I don't have any opinion about that. I haven't studied it enough, but what I will tell you is what I'm talking about, you can do without relying on explaining it with anything that sounds like that. Everything I'm explaining, I can track it back to science and peer-reviewed science. And then you have the spiritual area. Spiritual is awareness, and then more so, but awareness of awareness. So we're aware that we're aware. We've all been in that situation where we've been aware of something, and we're doing something that we said we weren't going to do, and yet we're doing it anyway. And that awareness of the awareness, but having the emotional connection as well as the awareness and the inner strength that you stop. And it's not something that you're walking away from, it's because you're walking toward. And that's the spiritual area. So the spiritual area, in simple terms, is consciousness, that powerful present moment where we have pure consciousness. That's the awareness of awareness, for lack of a better way to describe it, because there is no real way to describe consciousness. Purity of thought, so no regrets of the past, no anxiety about the future. And then pure mind. The mind is not distracted. It's not on to something else. If you have to meditate a little bit to get there, then we meditate. And part of one of the tools I use in the spiritual area is breathing, because by centering ourselves and over centering ourselves with breathing, you can actually center just by taking a breath. So if something is a triggerable event happening, you can take in a deep breath and it centers you because you've done it so many times. I don't want to get into too many of the details because I can do a whole session on each one of these. And then the next one is emotional, and that's the one I did last week, so you can take a look at that one. It's the one before here. And that one is the modulating emotions, so that if you ever do get triggered, we're able to get back on track. This gets us back to a growth mindset. It keeps us from getting into an anxiety spiral. And this is powerful because if you don't have ability to modulate the emotions, and we do that by having a process called locate, label, learn. So you locate the emotion, you label it to one of the 8 emotions. Joan Rosenberg, in her book 90 Seconds to a Life You Love, says that all negative emotions come down to 8. And the reason that's important is because if you don't do that process, it's easy to think of everything is just anxiety. And now we just have anxiety, and it doesn't matter whether it's embarrassment or vulnerability or sadness or shame or disappointment or helplessness or anger or frustration. Those are the 8. They're all anxiety. But if it's anger, I have one thing that I can do. If it's frustration, I have activities that I can do. If it's sadness, there's things I can do. If it's shame, so it's different, right? If it's helplessness, if it's disappointment, if it's embarrassment or vulnerability, there's always something that we can do for one of those. But if it's all just anxiety, we don't know what to do. So that's a short version of that. You can see more in that. Then if you go out to the podcast, Life Expansion After 50, occasionally I'll go through and do the 7. I'll do that coming up. In the next 8 episodes will be a recap of this, but I'll do it from my studio. And then the next ones so the emotional is the gateway to the right side. So you have mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. And then on the right side, we have relationship, professional, financial. As I mentioned, I don't go into those a lot because they're more about what the person's quest is. And I have to ask a lot of questions, and it's looking for those blockages, etc. But we'll come back to the relationship. I'm starting with relationship. I'm going to do the drill again. $28.15. So I don't do those drills regularly. I do a variation. I alternate one and then the other once a week. I'll do it again. So the relationship area, and I'm just going to give you some platitudes for these, but there's three that come to mind, and one would be seek first to understand before being understood. That's the fifth of the series in Habits, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Seek first to understand before being understood. Powerful. I remember reading a book, How to Argue and Win Every Time, by Jerry Spence. He was called the winningest lawyer of all time, or at least that's what was quoted in the book. And I thought that I was going to get some argument techniques out of the book. And what it turned out to is the whole book was about understanding what the other person needs. He understands what they need so much better than they do that he's able to get a settlement that works, that they accept, because he's really tapping into what they want. You can't do that if you're so worried about your own self. So seek first to understand before being understood. And then there's the other one that's similar to that. Once you do that, then you do unto others the way they would have you do unto them. That's the switch up on the golden rule. Instead of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, it's more like a platinum rule, do unto others as they would have you do unto them. But you have to first understand them. Seek first to understand before being understood. And then you can do that. You have to have a conversation, and that's where you can have 1 + 1 = 3. You get the synergy. And there's a third principle I'll use in the relationship area, and that's being comfortable with win-win or no deal. Most people, when you start talking about relationships, most people know that eventually you'll be talking about boundaries. But some people set boundaries and then they don't adhere to them. They don't honor their own boundaries. They change it. I used to think that this was all about people bluffing, but what I realized is that they're just in such a bad space that they're reacting. They're reacting. And I talk about this in stimulus response in the emotional area, that if you let your reaction become your response, then you have these survival reactions. So they get the stimulus, they get a reaction, which is to lash out or whatever, or to snatch or to grab or to attack. And then there should be a pause before the response. But if they're already triggered or stressed out, the response becomes the reaction. And that becomes what they say. And now they're taking a position or setting a boundary, but it's not real. It's just a reaction. And then when they have time to think about it, it actually moves. So it's kind of a shift for me to see it that way. So now, but the point is, win-win or no deal, you have to be there in order to not really be vested in the outcome. And that's how you can get to win-win or no deal. And then in the professional area, I look at the self-determination theory. First of all, professional area is service first, right? Service. I look at purpose, service, and then the monetization of it. And I don't say that do what you love and the money will follow. I did the motorcycle thing. There was the passion business. It was supposed to work, right? But what I learned in that process is when COVID happened, it wasn't a purpose. That wasn't enough to keep me in the game and make me go through, eating cardboard for years until the rental business came back, because there was no purpose. It wasn't connected to purpose. My intention was always to come back around and bring the purpose into the passion. But what I learned is purpose first. You go after your purpose, and then once you have that narrow range of what's in your purpose, you make decisions within that and don't go outside. What I'm doing with my hands here is like the clock face. If the clock is 12, forward progress is 12, you go from 1 to 11. And that 30 degrees gives you that range that you can move in and still be on your purpose. Because as long as you're in your purpose, then you have the stick-to-itiveness that's necessary to make the professional happen. And then it's about service based on what other people need and want and are willing to pay for. And that's how the monetization can happen. And then you have the financial area. And there's so much to be said about the financial area, but I would say take the long approach. Compounding works. There's a cost of money, and if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is, because there is a cost to money. If something's that profitable, the smart money would move over and start doing it. It doesn't mean that all the ideas are gone. It just means that there might be too much risk in the beginning for somebody to do it. So if you're doing it as the benefit that entrepreneurs have is that they can take the risk because they don't have anything to lose or have much less to lose. But once you have enough capital, then capital preservation has to kick in, and now you're sitting there with too much risk. What happens is to have those constant double-digit returns, you're taking too much risk, and it's so easy for something to smack you. All right, so we're going to do this one again. I may have to take it easy. So I had 28 the last time. I beat the old time by 2.5 seconds at 25.83. As you can see, the actual workout doesn't take long. The amount of benefit derived from a neurotransmitter standpoint, and by strengthening the neural pathway and that signal, I'm now able to push my muscles more. So what I'll do after I hit my 2 months, my signal should be stronger, and the next quest will be to get back to, I was able to bench press 285. I don't think I'll get there again because I'm not willing to weigh as much as I did. And so there's going to be a lift that's accessible to me in the near term, but the first part is strengthening the nervous system signal, and the next part is strengthening the muscle. All right, that is the 7 fitness areas, high level. So life expansion after 50, mental, physical, spiritual is and emotional, that's the 4 of the 7 fitness areas that are in our control. And then it's the relationships, professional, financial. This is the last of the Saturdays where I'm doing live from the field. I'll keep doing the footwork drills. I'll keep providing updates. And I'm always doing something different because of the novelty. Remember, my body's working on stabilizing, and what I have to do is keep throwing at curves to do something different. So I'll update you, and I have an update coming in the middle of July, which will be post the two months. I've got the 2-month experiment going on. That ends around July 7th, and then I'll do an update somewhere around the 15th. All right, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you around. If you do this on your own, I'd like to see what your times are, just for comparison and for fun, for grins. All right, see ya.